Good evening. I would like to welcome you to the regular public meeting of the Henry County Board of Commissioners for 6:30 p.m. Tuesday, September 21st, 2010. At this time, I would invite you to join us for the invocation and the pledge. Commissioner Holder.
Heavenly Father, we come this evening asking your blessings. Help us to be mindful of the fact that everything in this world belongs to you and that we're only stewards of those many things that you have bestowed us with. Be with us this evening as we go about doing the county's business. Help us to remember the real reason for being here and to guide us through this meeting tonight. These things we ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask for an acceptance of the agenda. We have a motion by Mr. Stamey. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Roark. All in favor? Motion carries 5-0. The first item on the agenda is one I have been looking forward to all week, and that's a presentation regarding the Patrick Henry Historical Sculpture. Our presenter is Mr. Andy Davis of Andy Davis Gallery and Studio. Good evening.
Good evening, BJ. I appreciate it. Y'all can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
I stand before y'all, and I'm honored to do so. Thank you very much for y'all being here and serving the community the way that you do. In just a minute here, I'm going to do a presentation that will be a little bit of an introduction of myself, whether y'all know me or not, a little bit about the art history and the construction of particular types of artwork that I hope that everybody here will find interesting. Throughout the years as a professional sculptor, American artist, I've done artwork pretty much all over the country and pretty much all over the world, and I'm honored to have been doing this. And Patrick Henry was one of the people that I've always admired and respected, and just felt at this time in America, this wonderful county of ours, that it could be time to create a sculpture as a historical marker to honor Patrick Henry and the name of Henry County. I'm going to be doing this by the same business model that I have in the past, whether it's Ray Charles or radio or the Hugh Hefner sculpture going to the Playboy Mansion in California, to the other ones that I've done here, including the Ray Charles sculpture in Albany, Georgia, is to do this by private funds, by private patrons and clients of mine, and then would like to make a proposal to donate this sculpture as a historical marker to the citizens and to the county of Henry. Where it goes, very seldom does an artist pick and choose where their artwork goes. My suggestion would just be somewhere near or Heritage Park or just a prominent place here in Henry County. So I've been given about 15 minutes. I want to take about 6 or 7 more minutes and go through this slide presentation, and if any of you have any questions, I'd certainly be glad to answer them. This is the Little Mermaid that is one of the most famous sculptures in the world, and she's tiny. Art brings culture to the area. They serve as historical markers. They bring people together. And this is one of the most famous sculptures in the world, but yet it's small. Artwork doesn't have to be big, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to show this. This right here is one of the most perfect sculptures known to mankind. It's created by Michelangelo Buonarroti in the mid-1400s. He was about 26 years old when he created this from one of the most rarest pieces of marble known to man. It was a 17-foot tall block of marble that another artist was having problems creating anything from, and they didn't like his design. So Michelangelo was given this piece of marble to create one of the most famous pieces of artwork known to man. And Michelangelo, he didn't choose where this sculpture was going to be placed either. A committee did that for him. Again, one of the most famous pieces of artists, in my opinion, is the greatest piece of artwork, is the Pieta, again by Michelangelo. He created this artwork when he was in his mid-20s. This is one of the first and only pieces of artwork. This is, I'm telling this to y'all for the importance of art as artifacts and as historical markers. This is one of the only pieces of artwork that any country in the world has a decree that if any foreign government tries to do anything to this piece of artwork, that they would be willing to go to war over it. It's this one right here. This is Donatello's sculpture of David. It was about 4 or 5 years ago that it was discovered that the model for this sculpture here, this fellow here is about 4 feet tall, that the model for this was Michelangelo when he was about 13 years of age. In their Providence and the Raisons, they've discovered that when Michelangelo was working as an apprentice for Donatello, it was discovered that he was the actual model for this. And of course the value of this it became priceless at that time. So that's Michelangelo at about 13 to 14 years of age. This is the Kiss. This is done by Auguste Rodin. This is the Thinker, again by Auguste Rodin. Again, these are very familiar pieces of artwork and very important pieces of artwork throughout the world. And then, of course, this is French's sculpture of Abraham Lincoln. Again, you can tell the historical significance of art placed around the world. And this is the installation of it. A lot of people think that these pieces are created in one piece. Very seldom are they ever created in that fashion. And they were stacked on. About a third of this is Georgia granite, by the way, if not more than that. Again, here is to the left you have the Vietnam Wall by Ling, and to the right of that is one of my heroes. He's one of the sculptors. His name is Frederick Hart. He created the 3 soldiers that were coming out of the woods where they're actually looking at the Vietnam Wall. Absolutely wonderful. Mr. Hart died about 6 years ago at 55 years of age. He also created the fascias for the Washington National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. This is one of my very favorite pieces of artwork. This, of course, was created by myself, Andy Davis. It's the Ray Charles sculpture. It's in Albany, Georgia. It's a little bit larger than life size. This was a $2.8 million project. It's installed at the Ray Charles Plaza right there in the center of Albany. And not to brag, but they consider this piece of artwork one of their centerpieces of the area, and they're very proud of it. And I was honored to do this. And this was again one of the projects that I started about 3 or 4 years ago, making some phone calls, working together with the funding with Tommy Chapman and Albany Tomorrow. And just a beautiful, beautiful piece. I had a privilege of working with Ray Charles' family. His family flew in from all over the world during the unveiling. There was probably about 4,000 to 5,000 people there at that unveiling, and it was an amazing day. This was one of the I guess this was about the first week or the first 2 months I got started on the Ray Charles sculpture. I really couldn't see how it was going to look in my mind, and I had a little bit of concerns about it, just because as an artist I have to visualize something completely before I can get started with it in clay. Sounds a little bizarre, but that's just the way it is. So I started on the piano first. Usually I would start on the main subject, and again, in the left-hand side of your screen you can look at me holding a foam that was represent the microphone. Then on the right-hand side, you could see more of the details that were being completed later on in the day, and then the individual piano keys as I was working throughout that. This is the beginnings. I would say probably about the first week into the construction of the piano and the armature on the inside. And in the left there, you can see me using a rasp as I'm beginning to rough out the edges of the piano. Again, these are Ray Charles shoes, and you can see the work and the detail. You know, it's amazing that I'll tell you this on a more candid side. Somebody can look at a huge sculpture or a huge piece of artwork, and they'll walk up to it and they'll make the biggest deals about the shoelaces or the dials on the watch or something like that. So you really, as an artist, you really have to take care of your details, and I know that you know that as well, being commissioners. This is me working. I was probably about 3 months into the sculpture here. You can see the piano bench. It's not quite finished. The details aren't quite there. You can see the messy stage there. I was honored by the fact that the city came in and set up a stage for me in my studio that was about 5 feet high, because I wanted to create the sculpture at the same height that a typical theatrical stage would be. So I created the Ray Charles sculpture at that level so that people could see it from the proper viewpoint. And I use an oil-based clay. You can see that there's a torch in my hand, and I heat the clay up and get the particular textures that I want, and then begin to use the sculpting devices in that manner. And I have no shoes on there, and I just always work barefooted. If you just probably weren't wondering, but I told you anyway. This was, I guess this was about the third or fourth day as I was working on the Ray Charles sculpture. What you can't see there is that I actually sculpted his eyes under that as well, because who knows, in 1,000 years from now, I don't know where this sculpture is going to be or not be. It could be at eye level. I don't know. It could be in a museum. It could be at a vantage point where somebody could look behind those glasses. So even the details that people would never see, or that I would ever think they would see, finish those out as well. Almost every project that I do, and I will do that with the Patrick Henry sculpture, is I want to make it an educational project as well. I did that with radio, with pretty much all of them that I've ever worked on. With Ray Charles, I had kids from the Georgia Academy for the Blind come to the studio for 3 days a week for 3 weeks. We served them across the street with candlelit dinners, and just had a great time. And these kids had never seen before. And there was a point at the studio where they wanted to see what Mr. Andy looked like, and I let them touch my face. They wanted to know what I looked like. And here's the amazing thing, is that though they all knew Ray Charles' music, they never had an opportunity to know what he looked like. So this was an opportunity for them to also get on the sculpture and feel his face. And for you to have been there would have been absolutely amazing. Now this gal right here, she was getting all up in Ray Charles' face, and I went beside her and I had whispered to her, "Now don't you think that Mr. Andy looks better than Ray?" And right there is where she was laughing, and my wife took that picture. It was really funny. This kid here on the right, he was born blind, and I let him work on that piano. And I want you to notice what his hand is doing. He did about half of those, what's called a reveal, on a baby grand piano, and he didn't use any straight edges. He didn't use any measuring devices. And look at how straight those lines are. It was absolutely amazing. There was one area around that corner there that was dipped a little bit lower. But giving these kids the potential and the opportunity to do these things is very important to me. It always has been. And with the Patrick Henry sculpture, I would bring in the art students and the kids in the area and make this an educational project, and open my studio more to the public than I usually do. This fellow up here on the upper right-hand corner could see just a little bit, but not much. And you can see how he's touching the sculpture here of taking his hand. And Wes Sargentson had done about 4 or 5 stories on me at Channel 11, and he came down and got these kids. And just look at that kid's face there. That's the importance of art. That says enough right there. These were some of the final stages of the sculpture here of Ray Charles. I'm going to move on. This was the very last night. I took this picture myself. I just always spend a little bit of time with my artwork and just kind of relax and enjoy myself and spend some time alone at my studio. This was the next day. The foundry was going to be coming to the studio and making a mold. They'll come to my studio and they'll make a rubber mold. It'll make a negative of my positive. Then they put the plaster on it as a registration. Then it goes to the foundry where they cast it in wax. And this is what I want to do too, is I want to get some of the kids, the art teachers, the art students, the commissioners, and anybody else to go down to the foundry and watch the creation and the casting of this wonderful piece of artwork that we will all be proud of, and just make it a big event and make it an educational event as much as historical significance, because the casting of these things are absolutely amazing. Right here is, you can see that fell in the upper right-hand corner. When the sculpture, the way that I created the Ray Charles sculpture, he had passed away before I'd got finished with it, of course, and I used images of a concert that he had in Israel, and he had a crushed velvet tuxedo on, and it was blue, and we added a blue pigment to the bronze that made this sculpture look like, it made it even more realistic. Down there, they're positioning the Ray Charles to the piano for me, because as they weld the arms on, they warp a little bit, and we had to position each finger on those keys. Again, this is at the foundry. The sculpture probably weighed about 2 tons. This is one of my favorite pictures. It's amazing for me that you make one phone call and a lot of work and a lot of hours later, and it always winds up with a group of good people with big, thick contracts, and you realize that that things are really starting to take place. But this was a major event, and it took about 2 years from beginning to end. Most art projects do. Even the Patrick Henry sculpture, if all the funds were available today to me now, it would take about 4 months to create the sculpture and about 4 to 5 months to cast it in bronze. So you're still looking at about 9 months. So I think that probably within about a year I can get this project done. Again, we're going to move on. You can see the construction and how many wonderful and talented people that it took to make this sculpture reality. Again, that's the showing of the crowd there. How much more time do I have? I'm winding it down. Okay. Again, here's the unveiling. They had the United States Marines there. Again, during the presentation, I'm just going to keep going. I created the Truett Cathy sculpture. One is in Griffin. The other one is at their headquarters in College Park. And that's me and Mr. Cathy. Up in the upper left-hand corner is a model, which I'll also do with Patrick Henry. I've already gotten it started. Again, just moving straight on through. A lot of these are self-explanatory. Again, that's at the foundry as well. Again, there's some of the details that you can see there, the watch, the ring, and the Patrick Henry will have just as much. It could be a fantastic work of art. And there he's sitting there. This here is one of our neighbors. It's General Lawrence Griffin. We raised about 80. My fee on that was about $78,000. We raised about 90, and that covered the base, those historical plaques, and the installation. I'd probably raise about $90,000 to $100,000 for the Patrick Henry. Again, this was the creation of the sculpture at the studio in the clay, just like the. And there it is, of course, during the installation, the unveiling. Now I'm going to take 30 seconds here. I had one picture to do of General Griffin. It was a horrible, grainy photograph. I really didn't know what he looked like, but I took his measurements and I just did the best I could. I've never met any members of his family, but the two gentlemen on the left and on the right are his great-great-grandchildren. And look at the resemblance there. It was almost uncanny. We didn't even know they were going to be there. And when they saw it unveiled, they couldn't believe it. They said that this looked just like their dad. Their dad, not just General Griffin, but you can see the family resemblance there. That was one of the proudest moments of my career, actually, and it wasn't one of the biggest moments of my career. Radio, this is up in Anderson County, South Carolina, from the movie Radio, again in the wax. Right after being bronze, he came to the studio, signed his famous signature there, this unveiling. That's Coach Jones and Radio. We're just going to keep going through. A lot of these are self-explanatory. This is a Hugh Hefner sculpture, which is going to the Playboy Mansion next year. I think we're going to also do a Marilyn Monroe sculpture next to him. And I was out there February 10th and 11th as his guest, and he modeled for me, and it was a great time. And again, there's the sculpture there. That's the inside of the studio, and that ends the presentation. Do y'all have any questions?
I'm absolutely thrilled with the prospect of having a sculpture of Patrick Henry right here in Henry County. I can't thank you enough for wanting to head up this project and bring something of this magnitude to our community. I don't know if any of the other board members have comments they'd like to make.
Thank you for that, PJ.
It's awesome. I mean, the work was awesome. I really didn't know what the process was, and I'm glad that you went through the entire process.
Yes, sir.
But it is awesome.
Thank you.
You're very talented.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, Jared, not only to have it here, but have it done by you.
Oh, thank you.
I think that goes a long ways. I mean, that you're right here in our county.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's impressive.
Thank
Very
you.
rare. I've had the privilege of being in the studio and standing next to the Ray Charles sculpture before it was completed, and it is fascinating.
I remember that.
It's a fascinating process.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. I really do. I've really enjoyed the presentation, and I guess I envy you for having so much talent.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks a lot. I'm tough to live with.
Well, and I appreciate your comment, too, about your favorite sculptor being Ray Charles, and you need to brag on yourself. You did a great, you're very, very talented.
Thank you.
And it's a beautiful work of art.
Thank you.
And I know that we're placing a lot more emphasis on the arts here in Henry County, and you're playing a vital role in that, and you understand how important it is to promote that within a community and how it adds to the quality of life and economic development.
Yes.
And so I appreciate very much what you're doing for us.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Any other board member with a question or comment? And what are the next steps, basically?
The next steps is that I'm going to form a committee or a board, if you will. It would be like a steering committee that will work with me, going to the community, contacting patrons and sponsors, and raising the money for it, setting up a proper account, getting a facilitator for that. Probably one of the arts councils here. We'll work closely with them. And then I'm going to create a model of this called a maquette. I've already started on it, and any of you can come by at any time and see this. And I could even maybe represent that as to what the sculpture will look like. It'll be about 2 feet tall, and then I'll actually start the sculpture even before a lot of the funds come in, and I've done that, and that's been 100% successful with all the other programs that I've done, is I'll start the sculpture and get it going so that as people are making contributions to the sculpture, they see that the sculpture already has legs, it's moving forward, we've got good people involved in the process, it's well publicized, and the sculpture will actually pull the funding along instead of taking a year and doing nobody sees anything, and then you start with the sculpture at the end. It doubles the time too. So by the time the sculpture is completed, the funds have been in, but the sculpture will already be done before all the money gets in. But I've never had a failure yet. Every project that I've ever started has always seen its completion, and I haven't missed a deadline at this point, and I won't here either. And so that's the next step, is I'll start making my contacts and getting the board and the committee put together.
Well, and I don't know if you'll have the time to do this or not, but maybe every few months you can come and give a presentation like this and update the citizens who are watching via Channel 14 and let them know how things are progressing, and it might encourage them to get involved with the fundraising effort.
I'll count on that. I'll do that. Every other month or every month, it doesn't matter. I'll be willing to do that, absolutely.
Great.
I'd enjoy that.
Thank you so much.
I'd enjoy it.
Question. Andy, you have any more of these brochures? I see Johnny signing mine. I want to make sure I get out of here with it. But do you have any more of these?
Yes, sir. I brought 6 or 7.
Maybe Johnny's already got them. I don't know.
Know where they went.
That's my wife, Jerry. Any other questions?
Anybody else?
Okay. Thank you all very much. I appreciate
Thank you. Moving on to Planning and Zoning Services, this is a public hearing for Aldi Incorporated of Salisbury, North Carolina, MC-10-09. Aldi Incorporated request a modification to a zoning condition. The property is located at 398 Jonesboro Road in land lot 126 of the 7th District. The request is to modify zoning condition number 8 regarding signage. Our presenter is Sherry Hobson Matthews, Planning and Zoning Department, exhibit number 11.
Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. As Chairman Mathis has indicated, Aldi's Incorporated has contacted the Planning and Zoning Office and seeks to eliminate a zoning condition that was placed on the rezoning back in July. The zoning condition that they are wishing to remove is in regards to the signage. When the request was previously approved by the board, the applicants were limited to one ground sign. Currently, the Aldi's has been constructed, but there is an existing out parcel that was not combined as part of the development, and the applicant is wanting to be able to have the ability, in the event that they are able to lease that out parcel, have the ability to have a secondary ground sign. If you all will refer to your packages, it's just condition number 8, in which they were granted one primary ground sign not to exceed 15 feet. If you'll notice in the executive summary, staff did not make a recommendation because typically on conditions that are placed by the board, we do not make recommendations. I would ask that if the board does seek to approve this request, that you be consistent with what's already in the area, and typically, most of those signs in the area are 15 feet, but they are ground-mounted signs and not pylon signs. Should you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Does any board member have a question for Sherry? If not, at this time I'd like to call the applicant or their representative forward. And if you would, please state your name for the record. You have 15 minutes to add any additional information that you'd like to add.
Good evening. My name is Robert Oakes, located at 3235 Satellite Boulevard, Duluth, Georgia. And just to reiterate what Sherry said, we're looking to modify the zoning to allow the future outparcel user, which the address is 398 Jonesboro Road. It was the former house that was torn down. We would like the ability to have a future ground monument sign not to exceed 15 feet in height on that parcel.
Does any board member have a question or comment for the applicant? All right, if not, I'll reserve the remainder of your time, and at this time I'd like to call for any opposition to the applicant's request. Yes, if you would, please step to the microphone and state your name and address for the record, and you have 15 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Monica Johnson, and I live at 902 Waterview Court in the Autumn Lakes subdivision right off of Jonesboro Road, very close to the Aldi. My only question would be and concern would be I don't understand the need for asking for a sign right now. I'm concerned about what type of business is going to be placed there. I don't understand the need for the sign now. Aldi has a sign there. It's a nice height. It's kind of loud, but I'm thinking that this is a precursor for something else, like a fast food place or something like that. I'm really not sure what the reasoning is for this request from Aldi. There's really nice homes right behind the Aldi where there's no buffer, none. So I'm very concerned about their request and putting something, a Burger King or whatever, right there behind $250,000 to $300,000 homes, the Bridgewater subdivision. So I'm just expressing concern about the sign as being a precursor for something else that's going to be placed there. We're having to deal with a lot of buildup in our area, and Jonesboro Road is looking a lot like Terra Boulevard to me. There's just no consistency in the signage. There's a dentist office right behind the Bridgewater subdivision, and that sign is ugly. It's an ugly sign. To me, it's an eyesore. The dentist office is nice, but the sign is ugly. So I'm just very concerned about what's getting ready to be put there in that place right there. So.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Perhaps when the applicant comes back, he can address that concern. Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition? Good evening. If you could, please state your name and address for the record.
My name is James Reeves. I live at 466 Chandler Ridge, and it's not really in opposition. What I'm wanting, and I'm very relieved at the sign that they did put up with the Aldi's that's there, and I'd like to sort of, if there's any way to keep it in a stone, I think it's a decent sign, and no larger than the Aldi sign that's there now. And I like the stone makeup of it, not just the Aldi's part of it, but I like the way it's made. It's a proper size, I feel like, in our area. I live just right behind sort of the Aldi's at a corner to it. So, and then we put up for our own property just now a large 8-foot wood fence to give us some more privacy on my property. So, I mean, I would just ask that whatever, as long as it's a decent sign, the same size, and is made of some type of nice stone, I don't have any problem with it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak in opposition to this request? Okay. If not, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of the applicant's request? If the applicant would like to come back forward, please. Does any board member have any additional questions for the applicant? Would you like to respond to the sign concerns that were expressed?
Sure. What we're requesting tonight is the same conditions in which we built our sign there on the site, which is now constructed. It's a monument sign made out of materials similar to the structure of the building. Our structure is brick. It's a brick sign. It's a ground-based sign. It doesn't exceed 15 feet in height, and that's what we'd be looking or that's what we were asking for the out parcel. As far as some of the concerns about the fast food uses, the zoning of the property prohibits any drive-through or any business of that type of nature.
Okay. Any board member have a question for the applicant or staff before I call for a motion?
I need a conversation with Sherry, if I could. Sherry, I have a question for you. The lady mentioned something about the buffer. Have we been out there? The conditions call for a 20-foot undisturbed buffer along with Leyland cypress too. That's what's done out there, isn't it?
That is my understanding, because I'm almost sure that they're almost close to finaling this development. So a buffer should be in place. I will verify tomorrow through the building department, but it is my understanding that some type of buffer should already be in existence there.
It is, Mr. Reeves. I know I went out to his house. We were out there a couple different times to making sure that certain area didn't get disturbed. I want to be consistent, especially behind this piece of property if we do this.
Right.
Correct?
During the initial construction and clearing of the site, tree protection fence was put up for that 20-foot undisturbed buffer, and that was maintained throughout the course of construction. And then the double row of Leyland cypress was planted, staggered, a minimum of 6 feet in height. And some of the Leylands have died, and today the dead ones were replaced. So the buffer's complete. We received our CO on Monday. So as far as we know, we have met the obligations set forth in the zoning condition.
Okay. And Sherry, this is a monument-based sign we're referring to, right?
It will be a monument-based, but what I would suggest is, because they're asking to remove the condition in its entirety, maybe not remove the condition in its entirety, but just amend the condition to read that they shall be allowed 2 ground signs, one for the existing Aldi's and then one for the out parcel, and then it'll keep the same language as far as the brick, stone, stucco, ground, monument-based, and not to exceed 15 feet in height.
Has this parcel ever been combined with the other one yet?
No.
Well, you really don't, because this sign would be tied to that parcel, wouldn't it?
Well, because it's 2 separate parcels, the way the Unified Land Development Code reads today, it's an individual parcel, so they could come in, submit an application, had this condition not been placed on the property, And it could have been a 15-foot sign, either ground-based or pylon, because our ordinance doesn't stipulate ground-based versus pylon. And so that's why I'm suggesting that if the intent is to keep it ground or monument-based, then just amend that condition to state that they will be allowed the secondary sign for the out parcel, and then it'll be consistent with the character of that building, or the facade of that building.
Anything else, Mr. Stamey? No. Mr. Holder?
Without, and I ask this question of either the applicant or staff, without being specific with names in reference to Ms. Johnson's concern about the type of business, obviously this would be a business, whatever it might be, that's allowed in the zoning classification that this one is zoned.
That is correct. In looking back at the resolution, it does not appear that they were excluded from any uses under C1.
So any of the allowable uses in C1 zoning could be in that particular location. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
And the applicant, would you like to respond to that?
Without having the list of uses in front of me, I can't respond specifically to each one, but certainly whoever ends up buying or leasing that property is going to be our direct neighbor, too. We have standards for who we like to co-tenant with. We certainly don't want any noxious uses or uses that would detract from our business, certainly.
Okay.
And I would add that originally the request did come in for C2, which is a general commercial classification, and the board did deny that request. And
which would have allowed the drive-through and the various things that are being referred to.
Yes, sir, but I will tell you, under C1, restaurants would be an allowable use.
I understand.
Yes, sir.
But not
but
a drive-through.
But it would be neighborhood commercial type uses.
Exactly, but not a drive-through. Or is it allowable in a drive-through?
That would be allowable, a restaurant with the drive-through.
But I believe you said this specific site would not allow a drive-through. Is that correct?
In my reading of the resolution that was approved, I don't see a condition that prohibits them from having a restaurant with a drive-through. And there were no restrictions placed on this rezoning back in July that would prohibit it.
It was our understanding that there couldn't be a drive-through when the C2 was denied and C1 was, it was amended to C1, but without me reading the code over.
Is this consistent, the zoning consistent with ULDC in disallowing it?
Oh, absolutely. What they are requesting would not be something that is not consistent with the Unified Land Development Code.
Okay. That's all.
Mr. Bowman?
I just wanted to clear up one thing. I didn't understand what. Did you say that the 20-foot buffer was cleared and then it was put up, and then you put up, or did?
No, I'm sorry if I didn't explain that very well. When we were clearing the entire site, a tree protection fence was put up to identify the 20-foot undisturbed buffer. So when they're out there with machines, they wouldn't go too far and remove trees that weren't supposed to be removed as part of that 20-foot undisturbed buffer.
And you added the Leland cypress.
Right, yeah, towards the end of the construction, when the site was fine graded and landscaping was being installed, the Leland cypress, probably 2.5 weeks ago, were installed, and then just today, some of the dead shrubbery was replaced.
I'm sorry, I just didn't understand. I thought I heard you say we cleared it and then we went back. I just want to make sure I understood it right. Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? All right, if not, seeing that this lies in District 3, I'll look to Mr. Stamey for a motion.
Just 1 second. Sherry, do we have any clarification on that on C1 to C2?
I just verified in the ordinance it has restaurants listed as a permitted use under C1, and it does not specify with or without a drive-through. So it would be allowable.
Drive-through if it was a strip center. Isn't that right, Micah? We went through this several times when we were going through the zoning. I thought that he could only do a drive-through if it was on the end cap of a strip center.
I believe that's correct. I'm not sure how it's reflected in the
Don't you recall?
ULDC right now. I don't think it specifies what we did. It appears that in the previous prior code, it did specify commercial drive-through only on the end of the strip center, but that's not, that distinction is not made in the ULDC.
Excuse me? And this was owned under the other. So it's in there. Okay. Then I'm just going to make a motion that we'll approve it with 2 primary ground signage. We're going to stay consistent with the verbiage in 2. I mean, in number 8, the condition 8, we're just going to say 2 monument-based signs. Okay? That'd be my motion.
All right, we have a motion to approve with those stipulations. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bowman. All in favor? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did anyone sign up for public comment? All right, we're moving on to the county manager's comments. I guess singular or plural. The first thing would be a resolution amending the fire service agreement with the city of McDonough, and that's going to be handout number 2.
Madam Chair and Board, we're engaged in a process of discussion with the city of McDonough that may or may not lead to the merger or consolidation of fire services for the city. But I have before you a resolution which is a request to amend the service agreement between the county and the city, which will extend this process until February 1, 2011, which gives us an extra 120 days to get through the holiday season, and we've made progress lately, and I would hope that we could accomplish the task in that time frame.
Does any board member have a question pertaining to this item? If not, you have a resolution before you in support of amending the fire service agreement between Henry County and the city of McDonough, and I'll entertain a motion. Have a motion to approve by Mr. Stamey.
Second.
Second by Mr. Holder. All in favor? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. County Attorney, any comments? No, ma'am. Upcoming meetings will be Monday, October 4th at 9 a.m. We have a workshop meeting, and Tuesday, October 5th at 9 a.m., a regular meeting. Monday, October 19th at 9 a.m., and Tuesday, October 19th at 6:30 p.m. These are both regular meetings. If there's no further business to come before this board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Have a motion by Mr. Stamey, a second by Mr. Roark. All in favor? Motion carries 5-0. We stand adjourned.